Next we turn to intelligence, which will basically be memory. Also, it could affect how fast you can learn things, your analysis skills. What this would affect in the game would be, well, this is also the very important for wizards, for magic users, mainly in terms of learning new spells. But it could also affect any character's ability to learn something new. And this is pretty much in terms of being mental things. Well, no, not necessarily restricted to mental things, but in general, learning new things. Bonus to intelligence will give you an advantage over learning a new skill or learning a new language. It will also give you a bonus saving throw or a penalty if you have a low intelligence versus illusion spells. The reason, because a smarter character can easier pick out flaws in the illusion. He has a higher sense of analysis in terms of the senses, so he's able to pick out flaws in illusion and identify as such with a higher probability. And though I have set it up to learn a new language or to learn a new skill is a check. Basically roll 1d20 and compare it to your intelligence or your dexterity, depending on the skill that you're trying to learn. And that's basically it. Of course, if you're trying to learn something particularly difficult, you could always penalize it in any way you see fit. In terms of how many languages a character can learn, I mean, it's really up to the dungeon master. But a good rule of thumb, you could always just simply take the number of his intelligence and divide it by half. And that's the maximum number he can, of language he can memorize. Then there's a good, easy to go equation. You don't need to look up charts or whatever. Next we have here is wisdom. And of course, wisdom is always good to compare wisdom to more like street knowledge as opposed to intelligence. Intelligence is more like an analysis and memory, whereas wisdom has a lot to do with decision making. A character who is cunning, who is crafty, is also wise. It has to do with judgment and decision making for those who may be new and confused with the difference between the two. Wisdom could also reflect the foresight that instead of fighting, you can simply give that hungry goblin that drumstick +1, as old Link did in the old days. The high-low wisdom will impact your ability basically for clerics for their spells. As wisdom is important in terms of learning new spells for clerics, for priests. Wisdom is also, of course, a useful tool in role-playing, how your character behaves. And that's basically all for wisdom. Constitution is a character's health, his stamina, his general physique. So a healthy individual who doesn't get sick as much. It's also important traits for fighters as well. A high constitution will give you bonus hit points. That same bonus will apply to hit points, but only at first level, only in that first roll. And of course, a low constitution will actually take away hit points because you'll be extremely unfit and physically unfit and unhealthy individual. So constitution will also affect your saving throws versus poison and disease. The older editions has something called System Shock Survival and also Resurrection Survival. System Shock is basically, as its title suggests, some sudden shock that may cripple, disable, or even kill the character. So for my campaign, I just prefer to just use a straightforward constitution check instead of having different rolls and different stats and just one system shock for everything. Make a constitution check with no modifiers, and that serves the same purpose and is easy and simple. And do you know what happens when a character's constitution reaches 0? That is correct. Dexterity reflects a character's agility, but also his manual coordination. So it isn't just how he can dodge arrows or something, but it's also the skills of manipulating items, such as a thief with his tools, for instance, or aiming with a missile weapon. That's all dexterity. Dexterity will affect the character's aim, his coordination, thus his attack rolls regarding missiles only. Since it reflects abilities, it can affect his armor class, and also his reaction and how fast he can move, and so it can also affect initiative. Bonus for initiative will actually be a negative, so it's just to consider. It can also grant you a bonus versus some saving throws that you can dodge, such as a lightning bolt or fireball. You can perhaps move away and at least avoid most of the damage of the impact, but that's only in certain spells. Of course, dexterity is a province of thieves. And a lot of thieves are pretty much dexterity checks to various roles, so having a high dexterity is extremely advantageous for them. Last of the classic character ability scores, we have charisma. Charisma is often overlooked because it doesn't really affect any sort of combat dice or character progression. But it's very important in terms of role playing. A lot of times, characters end up speaking to rulers and getting into politics a bit. They have to persuade people to get information. The DM could ask them to make a charisma check, see if they can convince them, see how persuasive they are, because charisma is like a person's personal magnetism, how persuasive they could be, or how attractive their personality could be, because charisma is not a physical trait. That's basically charisma. Charisma is very important with leaders as well. Characters who kind of have that silver tongue or that fast talk to try to convince you to something. A con man could also be very charismatic if he tries to convince you to one of his shady schemes. Forte of the bards, and also seek to inspire others to rise up and conquer and think they can fly. In the system, if the charisma table concerns itself with gaining followers, a charismatic person reaches a certain level, eventually it begins to attract followers. So it talks about maximum number of henchmen, the loyalty base, how loyal that they are to them, and reaction adjustment, meaning when you first meet characters, make a roll, see how favorably or unfavorably they react towards you. For playing things a bit more simple, we basically just resolve everything with a charisma check. If there's any chance you want to see how people react to you, or you're trying to persuade them, just make a charisma check. In terms of follower, you make a follower check would be a charisma check. Basically, you attract 1d6 followers, 1d6 henchmen. As a general rule, and that's it. These are the classic ability scores, but in my campaign, I have a 7th score, which is will, as in willpower. This exists in other games such as Call of Cthulhu. I believe it's called simply power. It's something a friend of mine had discussed as being a separate trait, and it made a lot of sense to me, and so I incorporated it. So basically, willpower is your ability to resist urges or temptations or anything of the sort. So this is what gives you a bonus to saving throws versus mental attacks. So when cast sleep or charm on you, you have a high will, it'll give you a bonus. Since this also pertains to a sort of a spiritual or mental strength and endurance, it's also very important to all spellcasters, because I base the rolls for spellcasting upon their will. So it's very important that being able to harness the magical energy, wherever it may come from, also is a matter of will. So yeah, we have that 7th trait. One trait that D&D had brought around in the early years was comeliness. Comeliness being physical beauty. How physical attractive is that? And I don't include that among the character abilities. It's just something I just let the players decide if they want the character to be good looking or not, or handsome, or whatever they want to put down. I basically just have a separate stat in the character sheet that says comeliness, and they could just basically write however they want to describe themselves. At least I don't make a thing out of rolling dice for it, and at least for me it's just not as important as other stats in the game. But if it was so shoot yours, you could always add it as an 8th character ability scores in your game, and apply it how it fits in the role-playing aspects of the game. So there you have it, kind of some basics of the games and just how to keep things good and simple, and yet essentially still be D&D, still keeping the basics in there. And if players want to be pampered, you tell them.
I'ma get medieval on your ass.
Thank you, and farewell for now.